So hello everyone, and be welcome to this session in which I'm going to present my thesis presentation. By the way, my name is Miguel. I titled my thesis, Population Viability Analysis and Comparison of Two Monitoring Strategies for the bottlenose dolphin, Tursiops truncatus in the Shannon Estuary Island in order for management. First of all, I'd like to introduce yourself to the topic, talking about a little bit about the Shannon Estuary. The Shannon Estuary is a long waterway located in the west coast of Ireland, and which was designated as a special area of conservation in order to protect a resident bottlenose dolphin population. The Republic of Ireland, as member of the European Union, has to meet a series of obligations established by the Habitats Directive in order to maintain a favorable conservation status of this population. As part of these obligations, a series of monitoring activities have been carried out in the area since the early 90s, and a number of long-term photo identification studies have been developed. And these studies had revealed relevant insights of this population, such as its small size, genetic isolation, site fidelity, reduced on range, and a stable trend. Then, talking a little more in a more detailed way about the Shannon Estuary, here you have a more detailed map of the area. There are two critical areas for the bottlenose dolphin, which are located here and here, which are ecologically important for the species. We can also say that the Shannon Estuary is a quite busy area, a quite busy home for the bottlenose dolphins, since we have around 1,000 ships every year carrying around 12,000 millions of tons of cargo. We have also some other sources of disturbance, for instance, two power stations located at Money Point and Tarbert, also one alumina smelting plant in Ognish, and finally we also have four main harbors with particular importance at Foynes and Limerick. Then talking about research, there are two separate research teams right now carrying photo ID service in the Shannon Estuary. One of them is the National Parks and Wildlife Service, which is a governmental organization in Ireland, and which carry out triennial service since the beginning of this century, approximately. We also have the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group, which is a charity organization dedicated to the public awareness and conservation of marine mammals in Ireland. And this team carry out annual teams with an increase, annual service, with an increase of effort since 2012. Then now, knowing that the Shannon Estuary is a protected area for the bottlenose dolphin, but also it's impacted, and also that we have two different research teams carry out research at the same time, we may ask ourselves if current monitoring activity is properly informing management, or even if any of current monitoring programs is better than the other, how we can improve current monitoring strategies, or where should we focus on in order to reach this improvement. To answer these questions, we set two main objectives for this thesis. The first one was to use photo ID data in order to compare both monitoring programs. And the second one was to apply population viability analysis in order to first explore population trajectories under different scenarios that may can occur in the Shannon Estuary, and also to identify relevant parameters necessary to maintain a favorable conservation status of this population. Then getting into it, and talking about photo identification, in order to compare both monitoring programs, we had access for data from both teams in 2015, which was the last time that both teams carry out service in the area at the same time. We know that the Wildlife Service carried out a total of 12 surveys, identifying 100 individual dolphins and providing a marine capture abundance estimates on 114 individuals. On the other hand, the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group carried out 77 surveys, identifying 136 dolphins, providing a minimum abundance estimate of 145. And also an interesting question that is that, according to this study by Baker et al., they reported that no new individual was added to their catalog in 2015. Therefore, this suggested that perhaps the whole population had been already identified during that period. In order to answer that question, we decided to match both catalogs. The first result of this was that no new dolphins were identified by the Wildlife Service. Therefore, the suggestion made by Baker et al. May be true. Maybe the population had been already identified. But we also found something that we didn't expect, that was the presence of several mistakes, matching mistakes or misidentifications in the Wildlife Service catalog, resulting in a final number of 85 individual dolphins identified instead of 100. And this made us the question that how much would be the effect of these mistakes on the abundance estimate provided by the Wildlife Service. Therefore, we decided to repeat the marine recapture estimate, as well as to use data from the Iris well and Donfield group in order to compare results. The results of this marine recapture analysis are the following here on this table. On the first row, we can see the abundance estimate provided by the Wildlife Service on that year. In the second row, you can see the estimate resulting after reviewing their catalog and correcting their mistakes. And as you can see, it's remarkably lower. And therefore, this estimate was positively biased by those matching mistakes. On the other hand, when we apply data from the Iris well and Dolphin group, we get a much higher estimate. And considering this catalog was much bigger than the other, due to higher effort, we can say that higher effort will provide more precise estimates. And also, finally, on this graph, you can see all the estimates for the Shannon Estuary carried out so far. And as we can see, even though these are the estimates for 2015, more or less all of them are in the same line, showing us a stable trend. Keep this in mind, please. Now, talking about PBA, we used dedicated software Vortex, as well as demographic parameters for the Shannon population, as well as other complementary studies in order to complete information. We use all of this in order to create a baseline model, which we applied to perform a sensitivity analysis, which consisted basically in varying key parameters within fixed proportions. The parameters we analyzed were lifespan, inbreeding, initial population size, reproductive rates, and finally mortality rates. The raw results of this are the following. Here you can see a comparison of the population viability depending on lifespan, inbreeding, and initial population size. As you can see, lifespan seems to have a great effect on population viability within the same proportions. However, inbreeding seems to have a very weak effect, as well as initial population size. Regarding reproductive rates, we see that both parameters seems to have a quite great effect. And finally, regarding mortality rates, female mortality seems to have a great effect, but male mortality not. And finally, calf mortality seems to have a quite weak effect. Then, in order to analyze these results, we perform a sensitivity analysis applying a sensitivity index, which was calculated using this formula here, which basically measures the difference between the baseline model and the modified models at each of the proportions we used. We applied this index to two different vortex outputs. Here, this is the growth rate of the population, and this is the final population size. In both cases, we see that the highest sensitivity was provided by female mortality, followed by reproductive rates and lifespan. And finally, the lowest sensitivity was provided by first-year calf mortality, inbreeding, initial population size, and male mortality. We also performed, we used PVA in order to simulate different scenarios that may affect the population and to see what would happen. We simulated a reduction of lifespan down to 30 years due to the effects of pollution. We also simulated a light increase in mortality just of 2 adults every year killed by incidental bycatch. We also simulated the effect of double first-year calf mortality due to a lack of feeding resources, we also simulated a single catastrophic oil spill. And finally, what would be the effect of saving just one female per year? The results of these management scenarios are the following. And the first thing, here we have this line represents the baseline model. As you can see, it shows a slowly declining trend, not a hard thing, but still declining, which contradicts somehow the trend suggested by current abundance estimates. Then here we have the effect of saving just one female. As you can see, the population doesn't grow too much, but it still is a positive growth. Then here we have the effect of double calf mortality. As you can see, even though the increase of mortality is quite big, the effect is not that. And finally, here we have the effects of bycatch pollution and catastrophic spill. More or less, all of them provide a similar, quite steep declining of the population, being the catastrophic spill the worst scenario. Then now let's recap. We have seen then, regarding monitoring programs, the Iris Well and Dolphin group, due to higher survey effort, capture more animals, and this resulted in a more precise abundance estimate. Also, that lower survey effort by the Wildlife Service facilitated some matching mistakes, which also led to a positively biased abundance estimate, and which also can affect somehow future estimates. Also, regarding sensitivity analysis, we have seen that female mortality was the most influential parameter on the population's viability, followed by reproductive rates and lifespan. And this basically suggests that the reproduction capacity of females seems to be essential to keep a positive population growth. And finally, regarding management scenarios, we have seen that a baseline model showed a slowly declining trend, which contradicts the trend showed by the abundance estimates in the last 20 years. Also, we have seen that light changes in female mortality would have a great effect in the population's fate. And finally, we have seen that the population would be, in effect, vulnerable under catastrophic events. And now to finish, some future perspectives. First of all, regarding monitoring strategies, we suggest that more frequent surveys and higher research effort is desirable, since this will provide better quality data and more precise marine capture estimates. Regarding future research, we also suggest that it's important to gain more information of those parameters that still remain unknown for this population, and which, especially those that can affect the reproductive capacity of females, for instance, lifespan, and also sex and age-specific mortality rates. And finally, regarding management, we suggest that future management should focus on assess activities that may affect the population's viability. Some of them could be, for instance, fishing activity in the Shannon Estuary and surrounding areas, also the presence of persistent pollutants, and also the implementation of plans to prevent and mitigate the occurrence of catastrophic events. And that's some references, and thank you so much.